What up, world? This is the GoalNet, recording live from GoalNet Studios here outside of Chicago. And today you can see we got a handful of tools here. So unfortunately, my beloved CCM Premier 2 stick, with my first ever custom pattern, happened to get some damage to it the other day. And like you, breaking a composite stick is one of those things that just absolutely ruins my day. And I absolutely love this stick, and getting another one of these patterns would be quite cumbersome, so I'm not really in the mood to go out and buy a 3-pack of sticks or anything like that. So my goal right now is to try and repair the damage before it actually turns into a fully broken stick. So a tip I got from the GoalNet.com member Bunnyman, who's done a lot of work with composites over the years building bicycles, is that a little bit of epoxy and graphite lubricant can actually make a pretty good repair. So I initially tested this right when I started the GoalNet.com on a Bauer NXG stick, but that one was basically, I'd say, too far for repair, but was still a good exercise. But today I'm going to try it on the CCM P2. And if we look at the damage, got two pretty good gouges right there. And then you can see that's actually a split down the center of the blade, which I think would be the biggest challenge, is actually trying to get some of the epoxy in there. I don't know if you can tell, but my fingernail is sliding in there. And one thing I'd like to be clear on for anybody that's curious at home, thinking, well, is it a good stick? How'd the durability hold up? This stick's been fantastic. I probably skated about 50 times over the last 6-8 months since I've had this stick. And it's been great. Out of those, 50 skates since I've owned this stick, I've used it for probably 45, and that's because it's been my favorite stick. Part of it's due to the amazing pattern, and also it's not the lightest stick on the market, but it's really just a good balance of, really good weight and really good feel. I find that it feels a bit more like a foam core than some of the other composites on the market. And by no means was that something I was necessarily looking for, but again, it's just been like a great solid all-around stick for me. I love the, love the pattern on it. And of those 45 skates, it's a mix of, games, shinny or pickup, whichever you prefer to call it. And then lastly, just some goalie related drills with shooters, which is obviously one of the most abusive things you can have on your stick. So again, the goal is to repair this before it becomes a fully broken stick. So first steps first, I'm gonna mix up the epoxy and graphite. And the goal is to do 1 part epoxy and 1 part graphite. All right, so I'm gonna squeeze some epoxy out here. Oh, and unfortunately it looks like one side of my epoxy, which hasn't been opened in a couple of years, isn't quite opening up. So we're gonna pause and see if we can get that cleaned up. So if anybody's wondering why I have a fork, just find little things like this, an old, fork that's basically disposable, and just use that to open up the epoxy tube here. So as you can see, we've got the epoxy down there, and we were able to get both sides of the tube open. And now we are going to mix in graphite. And there probably is a little bit of a way, in full disclosure, to mix this a little bit more accurately. But this is my second time doing it, and I'm kind of a believer that this is going to be good enough. The reason for adding the graphite powder is that it is literally crushed up carbon fiber, basically, to oversimplify it. And the epoxy acts as the resin here, so we're basically building a patch that can go onto the stick. So with my fork here, I've mixed this together, and as you can see, it makes a pretty thick black, basically gluey type patch. And we're gonna take this and basically spread it into the gap and then clamp it together when we're done. So I've got a couple clamps, oddly enough, got a giant one and a small one here, and we're gonna use the fork and the butter knife to try and get as much as that as we can into the crevices inside the stick. Please realize as you're watching this, trying to do this through an iPhone screen is significantly harder than it is just staring directly at the stick. And as you can see, just doing this over a box to try and protect the floors. Unfortunately, it's winter, so doing a project like this outside, where I'd normally like to do this, isn't really an option right now. So basically my goal is to cover all of the area with the chips where the damage has started to occur, basically to try and give the stick a little bit of more structure and stability so that it doesn't continue to break or degrade any further. And the biggest challenge is that there's like a hairline fracture at the bottom of the stick, and I'm trying to get epoxy into that area, and I'm not exactly sure what is the right tool to get in there, but as you can see with the knife, I've got a pretty smooth coating on the bottom of this right now and have all the affected areas pretty well, I think, covered up. So the next step is going to be to tape this with some clear tape and then put the clamps on it. And based on my previous experience, the clear tape came off pretty easily without causing any damage to the stick, but worst case, I'm pretty sure I could get most of the clear tape off with some scissors if anything does overstick. So I'm gonna wrap this up with some Howie's clear tape and then throw the clamps on it, and that'll be the end of the video part 1. And after this dries for 24 hours, even though this claims it's probably 2-3 hour dry, I'm kind of conservative. I'll let it sit overnight, not skating again for 2 days. I'll take the epoxy off, sand it if it needs to be smoothed out at all, and we'll put it on the ice Wednesday night to see how the durability is. So as you can see, just have gone over this with this kind of old knife I had laying around in my toolbox, and just gonna scrape as much of this as I can as I get off, get the excess so it's as smooth as possible. And one thing I think is key as well is I want to go a little bit longer than the crack, in my opinion, just to make sure that we get some extra stress so that we don't make anything with the bond too strong and create weak points anywhere else on the blade. So now that I think I've got off as much as I'm going to be able to get off, I'm going to wrap it up with the clear tape. And again, one of those weird things in life that is way harder to do trying to look through your iPhone screen than it is to just naturally do it. That would be tape your twig. So anybody getting motion sickness right here, please realize this is miserable for me too, as I'm trying to tape so you can see it and do a halfway decent job. See, I got the whole blade. Oh, a little piece back there that we missed. And then just for good measure, I'm gonna run one piece parallel to the tape right here as well, just to make sure that I don't get any of the epoxy on my clamp. And again, this tape is removable after the process. This is not going to permanently live under my black tape bandits, or at least that's the goal. We'll see how smooth everything comes off. The purpose of this is just to make sure that I don't get any epoxy on my clamps and to somewhat just kind of make sure this dries a little bit smooth and uniform. All right, so now that this is done, we're gonna clamp it. And the key area is right here where it's the thickest, where the biggest chip was. I'm gonna put the clamp right there, and then also kind of at the other end of it. So right there is where the most length of the fracture is, just to make sure we get some pressure. And I believe a little bit of pressure is gonna help everything bond and end up in place. Alright, so small clamp should be pretty well dialed in here. So I'm going to put this one back here. And really try and put some nice good pressure in the area where I believe the biggest crack is. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. And again, the goal is to basically glue back together the crack on the bottom of this stick. And so to add what's probably the most awkward video I've made to date, the only other clamp I have is like a giant one that I previously used to fix a cabinet. So this thing's gonna be a bit hard to operate on camera, so please bear with me. But hopefully everybody's getting the basic gist of the message, which is a higher end marine grade plastic epoxy mixed roughly 50-50 mixture of graphite powder, which is a standard lubricant you can buy. Probably got mine on Amazon or Home Depot, but it's used to like lubricate door locks. Then some clear tape over the mix, and then finally some clamps to add pressure on everything. I'm actually gonna slide this, as I mentioned, as close as I can to where I believe the crack is. All right, and then I'm just gonna rest this in the box here overnight and let everything harden up. So hopefully bear with me tomorrow, or maybe Wednesday afternoon. We'll make another, somewhere maybe around 10-minute video showing kind of how it looks and any finish sanding that needs to be done. So this is the GoalNet signing out. Thanks for watching.